What's up everyone, I'm Andre from Air Photography, and today I'll be showing you how to go from this to this. In studio photography, we're used to shooting on smooth, seamless backgrounds, but we don't always have that luxury, especially when you're just beginning. You're most probably shooting on a wrinkled fabric background. So today I'll be showing you how I'll be fixing that in post. So let's roll the intro and get right into it. Alright, so here we go, we have our image open in front of us. So maybe in a further video I'll show you how to go from that to that. That's just a basic starting point for me. Alright, so one of my first moves that I'll always do is duplicate the layer and try and stretch out the corners just to get rid of these spaces outside of the background. So I'll use a rectangular tool and we'll just stretch it out. Command on Mac it's Command T, on Windows I think it's Control T for transform. Then I'll just hold in the Shift key to stretch it out. There we go. Just do the same on the other sides. I'll actually show you something else now. To deselect it's Command D. Sometimes I'll even select into my image and select a part of my subject because it won't really matter. We just draw it out. See, that's what happens if you don't. Hit shift and draw it out. Okay, so you'll see she's stretched, her arm stretched as well, but I'll fix that just in a sec. Select this side, Command T. Stretch it up, and the same thing on the bottom. So on the bottom here we have pieces of tape that was fixed to the background, and that's not going to stretch as smoothly, but it's not a problem. We'll fix it. Stretch that out. Alright, so now to fix these parts that stretched out too much. That's why I duplicate the layer, add a mask to it, and let's start with the foot. So you'll see on the previous one, that's where the foot was. Let's fix that. So I'll use a brush and I'll go to black. And just paint out the stretched part. There we go, same thing on this side. And on this side it's a bit dark, but we'll just paint it. And there we go. Okay, so we got rid of the pieces, the sides outside of the background. Right, so now I'll actually start to fix the background. What I'll do again is I'll merge these two layers. To easily merge, you select the two layers, Command E, and it becomes one layer. Duplicate the layer again, go down here. I'll just use a clone stamp to just clone out these pieces of tape. Alright, and now I'll create a new blank layer. So you just go down to this little plus sign at the bottom, create new layer, and you click that on. Alright. Now I'm going to use my brush tool again. And to easily select a color using the brush tool, you just hit Options and click. Option on Mac, Alt on Windows. Hit Alt and click, and now you selected that color. So on the blank layer, I will just start to paint. Softly paint. If you're using a Wacom tablet like I'm using over here with a pen that is pressure sensitive, you can do it this way. Then I'll be using, my opacity will be on 100 and my flow will be around 50 to 60. Then you have control of how much ink it's going to put down. If you're not using one of these tablets, I'll highly recommend to get one though, but you can also use your mouse and you can paint. But I'll show you here in the dark side. If you use a mouse with 100% opacity and a lowish flow, then you'll be fine, but you see it's a really harsh line. If you use a tablet, you can draw much softer. So that's just something to think about. Alright, so one of the main things that I'll first do when I start with an image like this is I'll start with the shadow bits. Here's a shadow, there's a shadow, over here's a shadow around the shoes. So that's usually a bit darker spaces. I won't select the most darkest area, somewhere that is a average representative of the shadow. And I'll just start to paint the lining areas of the shadow. So that's not a shadow part, but this is. Softly paint the shadow area. I won't worry too much, there's still little wrinkles over here, but we'll take care of that further on. Don't try and paint too much, otherwise it's going to look funky. Alright, an area like this, you'll see that there's a highlight over there, but that's a wrinkle highlight. So if you look at all the other parts, the shadows are full towards the side, so just fill in that shadow part. Here's another tip to even smoothen out shadows. If you used a very harsh light source and you get harsh lines, you can do it the same way. Just select a bit of the shadow and brush over the highlighted areas, and it will actually smoothen it out. Alright, a space like this, it's always important to look for an average color again. So this is a bit too much of highlight and that's a bit too much shadow. So I'll select a color over here and start to paint in this space. Don't worry too much if you go over the subject or the shadow. We'll take care of that a bit further in the video. So you can smoothly just paint all over the space. Remember actually to always first start with your shadows. Alright, so I'm going to fast forward the video a bit and just paint in the whole part. I'll stop it again on certain spaces to show you how to fix certain things. Alright, so just something to be careful about. When you work with groups in the studio, you usually get pretty close to your background and you start to get shadows on your background. So you'll have a shadow side and a highlight side. Just be careful not to paint your highlight and your shadow side the same tonal value in color. So you have to keep this highlights to keep it looking real. And what sometimes happens when you have a wrinkle running down the side of it, where's the blending point? So just look a bit higher, you'll see the gradient running from light to dark, and it takes about that distance to fade from light to dark. So just keep that in mind, and don't use too dark color to paint close to your subject, because then you're going to get a halo running around the subject. So just be careful for that. Alright, so when you get to a part like this on the dark side, where you can clearly see there is a shadow, don't blend it in too much, otherwise you're going to lose the shadow and it's just going to look like a dark spot on your background. Alright, so another trick when you're looking at your background, when you got to the point where now you're not completely sure if you got out all the wrinkles or how far you are. So you can just open up a brightness layer on top of it and push the brightness as high as it goes. Now you can see that there's still wrinkles over here. We missed a few over on this side and in the shadows. And on this side a bit. Okay, again, don't worry too much about all the wrinkles, but harsh wrinkles like these ones over here and on this side and here in the shadows we want to get rid of. So you can see the blending actually as well. So you can see my gradient aren't great from highlight to shadow over here. So when you sample now and you hit options, it's going to sample this light color, so it's not going to work as greatly. So what you have to do, make sure you're on layer 1, turn off the brightness color layer, sample, turn back on your brightness layer, and then you can slowly start and paint to get your gradient looking better. Now you can see that there's a little rip on top over here, so I'll turn off my brightness layer, I'll sample right next to it, turn back on the brightness layer, and you can just paint over it. Alright, when you get to this point, you start to see that the wrinkles are starting to disappear, but we have a lot of blotches around the image. So now we'll just smoothen that out. So you'll sample a neutral color again, somewhere between the highlights and the shadows, and you can just softly paint over the joining areas. Most of the time your corners will be a bit darker around the end, so just add like a little vignetting Alright, so on top here we have the corners are almost black. Mostly that creates a bit of problems. So I'll sample just outside the black area and with a pretty big brush just softly brush over it to get it to become a slight bit lighter. Then I'll sample in the corner again and brush over the image again. Okay, so this looks funky, but if you turn off the brightness layer, you'll see that the background is taking shape. Now I'll delete my background, the brightness layer, and this layer that you created, you can see how much smoother the background is already. Okay, we're far from done yet, but that was step 1. So now I've set up on my keyboard F5 is Gaussian blur. Otherwise you can just go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Alright. At this point I'll blur that layer about 30%, 30 pixels, and you'll see that it's nice and soft. Alright. Now you can see the spots that we painted our subject, that we actually touched our subject. Around the shoes, on her knee. So now I'll just add a mask again. Take your brush tool, click on this little arrow here to make your, or just next to it to make it black and white again, and you click on the arrow and you go from background to front color black. Okay, now you can just softly brush back the areas that you've touched. Again, you don't have to be too careful over here. Just make sure you don't brush back this area, just brush on your subject. You can turn on and off this layer to see where you've touched. Especially with someone's hair, you'll usually brush it. So just bring it back. Okay, for now that's good. You can do it a bit more carefully, but I've already done it. So there you go. Now I'll merge these two layers again. Layer 1 copy and layer 1. Command E or Control E on Windows. Now this is the next step. I'll take my lasso tool and I'll draw a mask around my subject, just roughly. It doesn't have to be too carefully done. See, this again is much easier to do with a tablet than with your mouse. Alright, now I've got my subject selected. I'll hit select, inverse, and to create a copy of that layer you can just hit new layer, I think. The best way is to just hit Command J or Control J on Windows, and you now have a copy of only the selected area. I'll hit F5 again, which is a Gaussian blur, and I'll blur that layer about 100%, 100 pixels. Alright, so now another thing to remember, all kind of images and backgrounds have some form of texture. So if we're done at this method, your background's going to be extremely smooth. If you zoom in, you'll see that it's very smooth, and that's unnatural. So what we'll do now, we'll zoom back out, we'll hit filter, noise, add noise, and I usually just add 1.5% noise. The reason for this is it just adds some form of texture to my background that looks normal. So it's a bit of noisy, but that is, if we go to the original image with the wrinkles on, you'll see there's some form of noise in the background. So we always want to keep that bit of noise. Alright, so now we have a nice and smooth background. It looks, let's merge these two layers. And you'll see it looks much better than that what we started with. Alright, but now you'll see we still have spots around the edges of our subject that we touched with the brush. So now we can just add a subject. So we can just add a mask, and we can go to our brush tool and just softly brush around the edges. Now you don't want to touch your background, otherwise you're going to see the wrinkles again. It doesn't matter if you still have slight bits of your blurred layer going over your subject. That helps the background and the subject to slightly blend together and makes it look much more natural. Alright, now again I'll add a brightness layer to show you how much smoother the background is. From that to this, much smoother. You can delete the brightness layer again, and we can zoom in, and you'll see that we still have small little wrinkles around the sides. Just add that brightness layer again. Okay, so you'll see now, for instance, over here I brushed too much of the blurred layer over my subject. So I can go to my masked layer and I can just slightly bring that back. Over here as well. Alright, now we can take this layer and this one. Let's just select both. There we go. And Command E, and they're merged now. Okay, cool. Now I'll just take my clone stamp and sample next to this little small wrinkles, and you can just slowly work them until you're happy with the image. Here's like this, you can just sample on your subject and just softly brush until you're happy with the outcome. Alright, so you can just clone and sample all the wrinkles out until you're happy with the image. I'm not going to do it all around now because I've already done it. So just for the purpose of this video I'll show you, but you can work it now all around all these small little wrinkles. You can take them out Again, you don't have to worry too much about it, because when you turn off your brightness layer, a lot of them you won't see even. So this big one over here, just sample and softly brush it until it begins to disappear. So you can just do that all around the image, all these blurry ones. Make sure when you work with your shadows that you always sample in a straight line. So if you sample there and you paint, it's going to look funky. So just make sure you sample within the shadow and paint out. You can soften your shadows also a bit, just like this, and you can make them straight as well. Alright, so that's how you take care of the small little wrinkles. You can just do them in your image right around until you're happy with how it looks. Like I said, I'm not going to do all of it now, just finish this little spot. And again, when you sample, you don't always have to sample in a flat surface. If you sample another wrinkle and you just paint softly, you won't even see it. So again, you can just paint it until it's soft. If you struggle, you can just add another layer, use your brush again, sample, and just remember to turn off your brightness layer, sample, put it back on, and you can just brush this area until it's soft and neat. Turn off the brightness layer, you don't even see it, and it is nice and smooth. And there we go, we have a nice and smooth background. Now you continue, you can just flatten your image, and you can continue like previously. Alright, so there we go. That's how I fix a wrinkly background. I hope this video helped you. I've decided to do a second part to this video to show you how to add a bit of texture to your background. So check the description below for the second part, and thanks for watching this video. Like and subscribe, hit the bell icon in the corner, and see you in the next one. Cheers.